just some general livestock judging principles today, and we're going to use these sheep as our demonstration models. The principles are going to be the same for all species, and we'll touch on a few characteristics of each species, but we're going to start with these sheep. Now, traditionally livestock judging is done on market animals. Today we're just have two ewe lambs out here. We're going to talk about some breeding characteristics and some market characteristics. And I have two extreme examples here just to point out some obvious positives and negatives to look for in animals. So we're going to pick on our old ewe Sally here a little bit today. But it's not because we don't love her, just because she's good demonstration purposes for us today. So one of the first things that you want to look at in an animal is the overall picture of how well that animal sets up. And for a meat animal, we're looking at market characteristics, muscling, okay? When we put a steak on our plate, that is muscle. So what we're looking is for muscling throughout the animal. And we're going to look for the important cuts of meat that are high value cuts, okay? So on every animal, those are basically the same areas, okay? So on a sheep, it's your loin chops here, okay? And then your leg of lamb that's going to come back from here, okay? So on a cow, it's also loin chops. It's this loin area that's really important, and you're going to have your rump rows. On a hog, it's going to be your hams, okay? But we get some value out of shoulder cuts, but it's not nearly the same value we get out of the loin and the rump, regardless of the species. So those are our most important areas. So when you're evaluating those areas, you want to look for, really, essentially, as you stand behind an animal, you want it to look like a square, a rectangle, okay? You want a really thick, a nice, thick, long, strong top line, and you want them to fill out with lots of muscling in the hind end. Now, when you're looking at a hog, you're going to be just looking at the bulge of that ham, okay? With a sheep, you're going to actually get your hands on there. The handler is going to brace the animal, and you're going to get your hands on there and be able to evaluate that leg of lamb, the degree of muscling, and you're going to be able to evaluate the loin, okay? So if you're going to do a livestock judging contest, if you're a kid, you do need to learn along the way how to put your hands on a sheep, how to evaluate that size of that loin, okay? And when I get done talking, we'll have all of you guys come out and try to do that. But basically, you're feeling behind the rib and going to the point of the hip right here. Okay? And since Sally's a little thin right now, you can kind of see those points. Okay? This distance. And then you can cup that in your hands, and you can really get the dimensions of that loin in your hands, and you can really measure them. Okay? The other thing we like to feel for is we want a lean animal. Okay, we want a lean, muscular animal. We don't want an animal that's all fat. So there's such a thing as over-conditioning too. So it's a little bit harder with an animal with a lot of wool or hair on them, but you can feel over the ribs and get an idea of how much fat is on an animal and how much muscle is on an animal. Okay, in more advanced shows, they'll do measurements of back fat, and they have different ways of evaluating these things that's more advanced. But for the basic beginner, that's why you'll see us rubbing over that rib to feel the amount of fat on that rib. Okay. A trick on a hog when you're trying to evaluate fat and conditioning is to look just behind the shoulder. Okay. If you see, when the pig walks, you see a big bulge behind that shoulder, between that shoulder and that elbow, just like on us, you get a big bulge behind your arm, that's fat. Okay, so that's over conditioning on a pig. If you watch a pig walk, you can see that. So that's the big thing that we need when we're evaluating a market animal is we're evaluating those meat cuts, okay? You want a long, strong top line and a lot of what we call dimension to the muscle, okay? It's the same thing if you think of like human athletes, that You can have just, you know, sort of strength, or you can have like football players that have a lot of dimension to their muscle, okay? And that's what, you know, like this old ewe doesn't have a lot of dimension to her muscle, right? She doesn't have a lot of muscle on her at all. But if you look at a market lamb that's ready to go on the rail today, and it's going to have a really thick, strong leg lamb. So that's the biggest thing when you're first looking at these animals, is just evaluating that muscle, how it looks like, getting your hands on it, feeling the finish that's on there. And then you need to look at the rest of the animal and how well they're going to hold up. And there's lots of different scorecards out there for evaluating different species. Each species kind of has their own judging scorecard of how much points you're supposed to place on each area. And as you get out and get more practice, you'll start to decide what's more important for you. And I'm a veterinarian, and so there's some things that I probably place a little bit differently than what the scorecard says. I honestly haven't looked at a scorecard in a while. But I look a lot at feet and legs. And anybody that listened to my judging yesterday would have heard me comment a lot on feet and legs. If an animal can't walk to get feed and they are uncomfortable, they will lose weight, they won't eat well, whether they're a breeding animal or a market animal. So they need to be able to walk well and stand on a good sound set of feet and legs. And then also you're just kind of looking at the general appearance of the animal, okay? There's some that are more stylish and some that are less stylish. Now here, you know, it's a little unfair. Poor Sally's a little thin right now. She's had some issues. But we have this Tunis ewe lamb out here that has been fitted almost professionally and just has a really nice finish. She's a really stylish animal. She really catches your attention when you're judging and you walk in the ring, versus our old gal here who doesn't catch your attention that way. And there's a lot that handlers can put into showing. Now we have a more experienced handler on the older ewe and a more inexperienced handler here, and that makes a difference when you're judging. You as the judge need to overcome that a little bit, because your handler is going to do a lot of tricks to try to make up for the weaknesses in their animal. Okay, so this Tunis ewe, she's on her own. You know, she's got to show herself off on this because she doesn't have as an experienced handler. But these guys are both doing a great job. So, trying to think what else here on my mental list. So, we'll have these guys. That's what I'm just going to do. So I was just going to say, these guys are set up with a side profile right now. And this is a great vantage point for evaluating top line. And like we talked about before, you want them to look like a rectangle really from the side. So you can see on this ewe lamb, she's set up a little downhill right now. And part of it is fitting, but she's got a long, strong top line. She's very level across the top. She carries out this levelness through her rump, and she's almost square all the way. So her dock is right here, and she carries a lot of that length all the way through her dock. So then we come over here. Were you guys able to see that? Was I standing in front of you? Okay. So Sally has a long top line. She is missing muscling here, but you look here also, and she slopes off back here towards her dock. Okay, so when we talk about that loin, we want that length and that strength to carry out all the way through the dock. Okay. So this is something that you can evaluate really nicely from that side profile. An animal that has a weak back, that will stand out a lot when you're looking at that side profile. Okay? So we'll have these guys walk a little bit, and you can look at them on the move. If you guys want to just go ahead and maybe just walk a small circle. So Sally's an old ewe. She's got a stiff gait in her hind end. So she doesn't carry herself smoothly as she walks through the ring. She walks very calmly and quietly, but she has a bit of a stiff gait. And our ewe lamb carries herself a much more natural, calm, smooth gait as she walks. And it's also a time that it's not just how the gait appears. Yeah, go ahead and set them up with the rear profile. That's great. It's also important to look at how strong they are on their legs. Okay, so we'll let these guys get set up. But you can evaluate, these are what's called the hocks, okay? This is what a hind leg should look like when it's set up, okay? This is normal positioning. There's even space